A woman tricks her husband out of a small fortune and lays low in a town that she can't stand. She must plot, manipulate, and dare I say, seduce her way out of her new predicament. Join us for The Last Seduction, a movie that we don't agree on at all. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I cannot quote this movie without cursing.
That is fair. This is a movie podcast. We work through seasons of movies. The current season is 90s erotic thrillers. This also happens to just be our 100th episode of this show, which we're not doing anything special for, but it's worth mentioning. But
yeah, I mean, this we could have restructured it so this was one of the big hitters. This was your Basic Instincts or whatnot, but screw it. Last Seduction.
No, we went right chronological order.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I'm just saying for the Scream show, for the A show, those big numbers, they always are a big movie. For this one, we get the middle of the season just by happenstance.
I'm not ruining good, sensible structure just
for sentimentality.
Yeah, especially since the episodes don't really get numbered on YouTube anyway. It's only in the audio feed, so like this is nothing but a bit of trivia to YouTube. So you're welcome, everyone. Have your trivia.
And they're our real audience, after all. Screw you, audio listeners.
I don't know if I agree with that set of it. Today's movie is The Last Seduction, which came out in 1994, directed by John Dahl. I don't think he's got any relation to Roald Dahl, but I mean, who knows? So
doubtful.
Yeah. Do you know who the Americans know who Roald Dahl is?
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay. No, dude, we love the idea of Willy Wonka and Matilda and all that other stuff.
Yeah, I guess some of the movie, yeah. But I feel like at the kids' libraries in school when I was a kid, it was just like there was like a whole shelf of just Roald Dahl stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if we have to pick over in America, we're gonna go Dr. Seuss. But Roald Dahl has his own place. He's definitely in those same shelves.
Good to know. So yes, The Last Seduction is an interesting one in that there's a lot of comparisons that could be made to Basic Instinct, but the key differences would be that in this movie, the femme fatale character is actually the protagonist of the movie. And along with that comes more of an anti-hero kind of vibe, and also kind of a bit more dark humor, I guess, is definitely in there. I wouldn't describe much in Basic Instinct as funny. There's maybe a few things, but not much. Whereas this actually does have some intentional laughs sprinkled throughout. I
mean, I wouldn't say that it is indicative of that, but definitely helping it is the sheer existence of Bill Pullman in this movie.
Yes, he is there in a supporting role. He plays the husband of the lead character, Bridget, played by Linda Fiorentino, and Peter Berg is the other big lead, who plays Mike. So we'll get into more specifics in a minute. Also, random Dean Norris appearances in this. Just I'll mention that now.
Caught me off guard, but he looks exactly the same. He's very easy to spot.
Yeah, he's not aged that much in 30 plus years. So, but the basic plot of this, if I can sum this up without getting into spoiler territory, is simply that Bridget, the lead character, has convinced her husband, played by Bill Pullman, to trade a bunch of pharmaceutical grade drugs that I think are technically cocaine. I mean, I'm not sure which pharmaceutical drugs are technically cocaine, but I'll believe they exist. And he sells them to gangsters of some kind, organized crime.
Just dealers in general, I would say.
And she splits off with the money, leaving him high and dry, and ends up hiding in a small town to stay away from him because she's conned him out of his money, and has to kind of make up an alias and live there for a bit, and then ends up getting to know Mike, played by Peter Berg. And let's just say she's always got a plan. She's always scheming, and she's always up to something to try and get herself out of the jam and get away with whatever she wants to get away with. And that's the basic gist of the movie.
Yeah, only two things I would add is that the husband he's got this money because he's under a loan shark, so he has a reason to really want the money. and then she wants her
Well,
driving
that's what he
force.
wants the money for. That's not why he has the money.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
clearly. And then her whole driving force is more or less, how do I make it so I get to keep all of this money even after like divorcing my husband and all that. So
Yes.
that's her end goal there.
Yeah, she wants freedom, I guess.
Mhm.
But not in the sense that it feels like it's a marriage that's toxic and she wants away from. It feels like she was always conning him from the start.
It feels like they're both toxic and they're like perfect for each other in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah. I'm not saying Bill Pullman's character's winning any Husband of the Year awards. I'm
Mhm.
just saying I feel like it's not like this is a choice she made when she realized, oh, I think I made a mistake marrying him. I think she was all. I think she knew he had access to these drugs because he's got. He's not quite a doctor yet, but he's on the path. He can write prescriptions. He's doing his
Mhm.
residency. He's almost there, so he's got access to this stuff. I think that was a long con on her part before we even
Yeah,
get
entirely
to
possible.
that, based on the rest of the movie anyway. So yes, and that's just the setup, right? So that's the setup of the movie, and we'll get into the rest of it a bit later. But to start off,
Hmm.
simply, David, what did you think of The Last Seduction?
I couldn't get into this one. I just couldn't. I sat with this. This is like a 2 hour long movie. Take off 15 minutes for credits, but like I just was so bored the entire time throughout this. I kept waiting for it to do something interesting, and it just never really did for me up until I would say the if you want to call it the third act, but I would even just say the last 10-15 minutes. I think that that is where it finally decides to be like, hey, look, we've set this up, we've done this thing. It's the equivalent of like a video of watching a man set up a bunch of dominoes, and then at the end he knocks it all down. The ending's really satisfying, but getting there is boring as hell for me. Uh, on top of that, I don't feel like there's a visual style to this movie. It feels very economical. It's like I would almost borderline to say it feels like a TV movie in a lot of ways with how it's shot. The music is so goddamn obnoxious for me. It's like this light, smooth jazz thing, like one theme that plays throughout the entire movie, and it gets so old so quickly. Acting wise, I think that it's decent. I don't think anyone like does a horrible job at their particular thing, but it's just not enough to save how bored I am with pretty much everything going on. Bill Pullman's the only one that I think is stand out in that regard. So yeah, overall, except for the last 10-15 minutes, it's the main love interest is maybe a bit of a mislead, but Peter Berg's character, he is so bored in his hometown life and he's just looking for something to shake it up. And I've never related more with a character throughout the entirety of the runtime.
That was a very strong
It was.
opinion, which I don't think I was quite prepared for.
Yep.
I thought this movie's all right,
All right.
bordering on good, even.
I'm not going to disagree that there's must be something in it. Like I looked at stuff after the movie was done and I came across Siskel and Ebert. When this came out, they gave it 4 stars. Like they loved this
Mm.
movie. It was number 5 of the year for them over like Shawshank Redemption. I don't get it. I have no idea what's going on.
Well, I'm not going to put it above Shawshank, but I will say that it's kind of this movie completely lives or dies on the strength of the main performer. Because if she can't captivate, because the entire movie is being captivated by her scheming, seducing, playing people, and doing all of her thing, and seeing her like be put in a corner but try and figure a way out of a jam. It's kind of it's an interesting anti-hero that kind of forms out of her because it's like obviously what she's doing is wrong, right? On a completely logical sense, everything she does is kind of evil, but she's entertaining to watch. And in a weird subtextual way, there's kind of like a, dare I say, almost like a feminist spin to this movie, which is that she wants out from a marriage and she's going to do whatever it takes to get away with it. Again, if you just look at the facts, yes, obviously what she's doing is wrong, but in the
Right.
context of looking at kind of like her determination and all the rest of it. And I think, I don't want to spoil like where it goes at the end, but I think some of the decisions that were made and how to end this are tied kind of into how satisfyingly, I imagine, empowering this character probably could be for a lot of women who probably didn't get to see characters like this by and large. Because even in Basic Instinct, you've got Sharon Stone playing this femme fatale, and she's got everyone wrapped around her finger. It's all from the perspective of Michael Douglas's character. It's all she's very much the mysterious, enigmatic character, whereas this character's not that. This is, like I say, a lot more like following an anti-hero do their thing. And I would say it is kind of a dark comedy as well as a thriller, and if anything, that's probably what makes it work for me, is that there's several times where when she does just blurt out something, it's kind of funny to see the reaction of the other people, how they're just not prepared for someone to be that blunt, especially a woman. I think, I don't know, I think she's very good in the role, and kind of makes the whole thing work. So I think Peter Berg is kind of just whatever. Like, he's fine, he fits the role. I don't think there's anything special about him. He's definitely not as entertaining as Bill Pullman. But Bill Pullman's, he's Bill Pullman, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, as soon as I saw him there, I was like, yeah, awesome. We're going to have Bill Pullman for this whole movie. And then he just goes into second tier status almost immediately. I'm like, no, please come back. I need you.
I mean, I didn't feel quite that way, but I will say that every time he popped back up, because his subplot is there the entire movie, it keeps coming back. It's not like he disappears till the end. He's sprinkled in an even amount, but every time it does cut to him, he tends to be funny. Like, his reactions, his anger at her for running away with the money tend to be amusing. So, yeah, I would say I'm fairly positive. I definitely like this more than Single White Female. I will easily say that.
Yeah, no, nowhere close for me. I can't even begin to compare the two. Like, this movie for me just had absolutely no conflict in my eyes. Like, yes, we had this hyper competent female character. She was going around making these plans, doing everything. But at no point did I ever feel like any of the characters were conflicted in anything they did. Throughout the entire time, it felt like they were very hard and fast on what they wanted to do, what they needed to do. The only one you get a little bit from is Peter Berg, but honestly, he feels like such just a blank slate, wet fish character that I didn't care whenever he was conflicted about something, because it just felt like you don't have any agency. All of your agency has been given over to the lead female character. So it's just, you're going to do whatever she says. That's why I think that the last 30 minutes are the most interesting, because it's where he finally comes into his own a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that I don't think he's that compelling on his own. It's more about just how she's manipulating the people around her that's entertaining. This movie works in unconventional ways. It doesn't work in the traditional sense of there being an arc, because this character does not have an arc. This character is just fighting to achieve something, and kind of the point is just like whether or not she's going to pull it off or not. And it definitely, like I say, it's not fitting a normal hero's journey or anything like that. It's not doing a traditional thing, like you say, where there's there's obviously conflict in that she's got conflict with her ex-husband and she's trying to do certain things, but it's very different to normal. But I think it works. I think ultimately it's always captivating to watch. This is the second time I've seen it now, and it didn't kind of lose any of its luster. If anything, it probably even worked a little bit better the second time round, just purely because I knew where it was going, and I didn't... I think the first time I watched it, there was definitely a lot of questions in my head of okay, how's this going to wrap up? What counts as a happy ending here? Who in theory, certain characters winning is what counts as a happy ending, and given where it actually goes at the end and how it sort of wraps everything up, I think knowing that going in kind of just made me enjoy the ride a bit more of okay, it's all about, like I said, the moving of the chess pieces.
Yeah. I mean, I see what you're talking about. On a basic level, I can see those pieces of the movie as you're describing them, but then I look at okay, where do I feel like the plot really actually kicks off? The actual involving Peter's character into this, which I know he has a name. What is his name?
Mike.
Mike, that's it. Involving Mike, getting him in on all this. When does that actually happen? That doesn't happen until like 50 minutes into the movie. And by that point, I feel like everything we've seen up to that point is just one long extended beat of she's showed up in this small town. She wants to escape her husband.
Did you say 50 minutes?
Yes, 50.
Once
she's in the town, it's just the exact same thing happening up until like the 50-minute mark of she shows up here, she's trying to figure out how to get away from her husband, like in a more permanent sense of things. And then she's just putting down roots. She's just doing nothing until finally at the 50-minute mark, she comes up with the first spark of her grand master plan here.
I disagree that she's doing nothing. Everything she does is motivated by the steps that are being taken to find her. I don't know. I disagree with that. Like, yeah.
I mean, she literally shows up. She uses a fake name.
Wait, hold on. We're not in spoilers yet, so just let's hold it for now, because like we're not getting into the actual meat of the plot yet.
Speaking generally, fine. She gets into town, but like, what does she actually do? Like, yes, she performs different action stuff like that, but ultimately, for me, what it feels like that she actually does is just waste a bunch of time until she comes up with an idea. And I know you're saying it's to avoid being found or whatnot, but it's not an engaging plot. That's like I'm saying, it's like someone just setting up dominoes. It's not fun to watch.
Well, Siskel and Ebert are on my side, so I mean, what do you want?
You know, see, this is why I wasn't going to bring that up, but like,
look, I'm only saying that because you gave me that example.
I'm sure, and that's the thing. Like, a lot of people are like into this movie. IMDb, it has like a 7.0, which doesn't sound great, but for IMDb,
no, that's
it definitely
good. Yeah,
is.
There's lots of great movies that have got like a 6.5. Like this,
right?
7 is perfectly good on IMDb.
And like, I that's why I was looking into other reviews of like contemporary critics, because I was trying to figure out, what did I miss? Like, what is going on here that I just didn't get?
All these other reviews you looked at, were they all generally positive?
I mean, I was looking specifically for the positive ones. If I was looking at negative ones, I'd be like, there we go. Yeah, that guy gets it.
I get that it's not a conventional plot in the way that it plays out, but I don't think there's ever a point in this movie where I felt like nothing was happening. I completely disagree with that assessment of the first half of this movie. I think her first interactions with many characters is some of the most interesting stuff in the movie. Some of the first ways that she does set up her life in the small town Beston, the knockoff Boston that came off the back of a truck somewhere.
I just saw a video on, I don't know, it must have been YouTube, of someone who got like some knockoff socks from China, and it was all just Disney characters, but like the names were horribly misspelled. And as soon as it said Beston, I was like, you're right, that seems like a knockoff Boston there, where it's just a nice little quaint village instead of the bustling Boston that we know.
Yeah, I don't know. Give me a chuckle when I saw the name, because I didn't remember the name for the first time I saw it. So no, I saw Beston and went, Beston?
I wonder if it's actually a real place, because that seems like the kind of place that they would just make up as a small town.
It does sound made up, but at the same time, like, there's some really weird town names in the US, so it wouldn't surprise me either.
That doesn't look like it's a real thing, because when I type in Best in New York, it just says Last Seduction. So,
well, I don't know if she's still in New York State. I don't know if because she's on her way to Chicago.
No, it is, because they showed the area code map later on, and it was like right outside of Buffalo, which is definitely New York.
Okay, fair enough. Because Illinois is not right next to New York, I know that much. So I thought it might be somewhere in the in-between, but yeah, fair enough. I was not expecting the harsh negativity. I think this is easily better than the last movie, and I think there's some competition with Basic Instinct in some ways, to be honest. I don't think anything in this movie suffers from some of the convoluted noir stuff that was in that movie. So
I mean, I agree that it's a more simplistic plot. I think that it's not nearly as complicated, but I think that's for the movie's detriment, because it never felt like I was ever asked to question anything. It felt like it was always just served up to me on a platter the entire time.
Yeah, This is so weird. Like the quotation you're hitting me with, I'm like, I don't even know how to fight them because I'm like, like I was constantly entertained. I'm constantly seeing someone who is like put up against the wall, admittedly her own doing, but is like conniving her way out of it, and I always found that entertaining.
See, but that's the part I didn't feel. I didn't feel like she was ever put up against the wall. It felt like even from the very beginning, like they told her, here's your situation, and she just immediately was like, oh, okay, I know what to do. Like it didn't feel like there was any issue here at all in terms of her competence. She never felt like she had any problems that were outside of her ability to solve immediately.
Well, I don't know if that's true. She has to go through a lot of steps to achieve some of the stuff she does.
Oh, yeah.
But,
she goes through the steps, but she still knows how to do it. She immediately is just like, okay, I got a plan.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It was always compelling to me.
Okay. That's fine.
I mean, I have the benefit here of knowing that like the consensus is more on my side, and that's not always the case because sometimes,
Yeah.
sometimes I disagree with the consensus, but in this case, I'll use it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I wish that I could tell you like exactly because I listened to what Siskel and Ebert said. Like I read the review and they were basically just saying the exact same you did, where like she's a captivating lead and she's always like knows what she's doing and all that stuff. And I didn't get it.
And let me make it clear, like the movie relies on that. If she did not deliver the performance she did, don't get me wrong, Bill Pullman's entertaining. There's a couple other little things that are cool, but if she did not work, the movie does not work in any way, shape, or form. It relies entirely on that performance. But yeah, I will tell you something that didn't work, though, is the HD transfer of this is absolute garbage.
Oh.
Yeah, like if you told me it was SD, if you told me this was just a DVD I was watching, I would have believed you. I looked up and apparently they're just like it's an old master from like the 2002 or something like that, from like the early days of 720p like broadcast HD.
Right.
And that's all it is. The Blu-ray that's out, even like the crappy TV master, there's just it's like, oh, maybe one day someone will remaster it, but until then we're stuck with this lousy looking turd.
See, I definitely watched a lousy looking version, but I rented it off Amazon, and Amazon has some level of like copy protection or something where they were like, oh, if your system is detected to not meet this, we're going to give you the SD version. So I didn't know whether that was just because it was my system did not meet their standards or what was going on. But trust me, I ain't going to pirate this, Amazon. You don't got to give me a shittier version.
It's very, very just muddy. It looks soft. It was never pleasing, and it was distracting throughout.
I mean, I could tell, especially in the opening credits, because they use like big block letters in front of New York, and it's just fuzzy. Like all the block letters have this fuzz to them.
Yeah, just something worth mentioning. That it's just for whatever reason this one's been neglected. I wonder if it's just a case of the rights are kind of in a weird place where none of the bigger studios are the ones who have it, so it's kind of just lingering in this no man's land where no one who owns it is willing to put up the money to actually do anything with it. Very, very strange. So, yeah, I mean, the director of this one, John Dahl, he did Rounders after this, which I know some people like. I've never seen it. He did a movie before this called Hard Rock West, which I think put him on the map, but his career...
Red Rock West.
Sorry?
Red Rock West.
Fair enough. You can tell I've never seen it. Yeah. But the career after that kind of dwindled. Did a few thrillers, I think, that didn't really go anywhere, that kind of thing. So...
Yeah, it looks like he basically hit Rounders. He did a movie called Joyride, and then from that point on, it was basically just like a TV director where he stepped in for like 2-3 episodes on a bunch of different series.
Oh yeah, he's still doing TV today. Is Joyride the... Oh, is that? Yeah, okay. I know Joyride.
Okay.
Interestingly, in the UK, that movie's called Roadkill. For whatever reason, they didn't think Joyride would play in the UK.
All right, fair enough. Oh, hey. Oh, did we have this in the running for something that we were going to do as a bonus during Fast and Furious season?
No, it was on a Screams After Midnight vote, 'cause it's a horror movie.
Okay, gotcha. Because I just see Paul Walker there, and of course, Paul Walker being Paul Walker.
Yeah. I didn't look that far ahead to see that he did that. That's interesting. Yeah. So I mean, the other going back to the cast here for a second, we mentioned the main names. The main actress Linda Fiorentino is kind of, or Fiorentino. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. She's kind of an interesting subject to discuss because she had this movie. She was kind of praised for her performance. She's in a couple other things of the time that's notable. She was in Men in Black. She had kind of the main supporting role in that. And she's in Kevin Smith's Dogma. But after that, she kind of falls off the face of the earth. And looking around as to why, for a long time, it was believed that she was difficult to work with. There was rumors that Tommy Lee Jones didn't want her anywhere near Men in Black 2, and that's why she wasn't in that one, or something. And I don't know if that's ever been remotely confirmed or if that's just like hearsay going around. Now, what wasn't hearsay is that on the commentary track for Dogma, apparently Kevin Smith made it very clear he did not like her, right? Which is, you know, whatever it is. But obviously, many years later, all the Weinstein stuff comes out. And I don't know, again, if she's ever said anything or people are just sort of like, oh, he was involved in Dogma. He was involved in some of the movies she was in. Right. Like, is there something there? Because, you know, difficult to work with is the sort of thing that people got labeled with if they refused to have sex with Harvey Weinstein. So is it that rather than she actually was difficult to work with? It's also possible that there's both are right. You know, maybe she was difficult to work with, but she also refused Harvey Weinstein, and that was like the 1-2 punch. But it's worth mentioning, though, after Kevin Smith had his heart attack, apparently she reached out to him and they kind of patched things up, and you know, he regretted badmouthing her after that. From what little, you know, stuff I saw online as I was sort of just perusing, because I was curious because she did, because I remembered from Men in Black. I remember the first time I watched this, I'm like, oh, I recognize you. What do I know you from? And that's what it was. And I'm like, yeah, why weren't you in anything like after that? Like,
I don't know. I mean, especially that was we had a couple of trivia bits, and also during the Ebert review, they mentioned that this movie technically aired on HBO before it had any sort of theater run or anything like that. There was just no distributors who wanted anything to do with it at the time. But because of that, she is technically not in the running for a Best Actress Oscar for that. But the fact that they were like bringing her up as she deserved to at least be nominated in her performance here as Best Actress is what was really shocking to me. Is that, I think she did a very good job with the stuff that she was provided. I don't know if it's Best Actress levels for me, but it's a good job at least.
Who would you nominate in 1994?
Well, golly, let me think back. I was one, so just give me a minute.
I'm not expecting you to answer it. It was a joke.
Apparently, Holly Hunter.
For what?
I don't know. Philadelphia. No, wait, that's Tom Hanks. What was she in? The Piano.
Yeah, I never seen it.
Yeah, same.
I don't think I've ever heard of it, to be honest, either. So, yeah. I mean, clearly people at the time were praising the performance. I think also one of the things I saw is that she kept getting offered kind of like sultry thriller roles after this, and she didn't really want to be typecast. Now, again, how much that contributed to just calling it quits, if that was indeed like her choice to make, I don't know. Yeah, tough to say. But
I mean, the fact that she also went into Dogma and Men in Black, it tells me that at least she was shaking it a little bit, because neither of those are really the sultry roles. Yeah,
no, that's fair. But yeah, it is interesting just for a sort of context of like where, you know, this movie sort of sits. It's kind of her big performance. She's in a couple of things after it, but this is the movie that she's known for, and is the only movie that she's ever really super known for, even though she's technically leading Dogma. But that movie's like filled with people, so it's whatever.
I was just say, I feel like when you talk about like cinema and any sort of thing, there's all other movies, and then there's whatever Kevin Smith's doing. He's kind of just branched off in his own separate thing.
Yeah. I don't know if I like the implication that Rob Zombie's counted in the cinema section.
All right, look, if we want to keep on to subdividing cinema, we can be here for hours. Is Neil Breen part of cinema? Do we need to cut him too?
No. Neil Breen's a part of some sort of weird meta like plead for like more mental health like care and research.
That's fair. I would believe that.
Yeah. So yeah, obviously she's the big thing here. She's driving the whole movie. Peter Berg, funnily enough, I know him more as a director. He went on to direct a bunch of things. Not like amazing movies. Yeah, he did like that Deepwater Horizon, the one about the oil refinery. Or not refine. Well, I guess that's a refinery. But you know what I mean? Like the oil, out in the sea, the oil.
Yeah,
thing.
the oil rig.
Yeah. You know, he did that one, did a couple other things. You know, he's done a few things. I think he did Battleship, actually, now I'm thinking about it.
Oh, no.
So, nothing spectacular, but he does direct stuff.
Friday Night Lights, the one movie, and then Hancock as well. Familiar with those.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Yep.
So,
I gotta say, Peter Berg, again, he was fine in the role that he was, but for some reason, his acting style reminded me of David Schwimmer in Friends. It's just this like hapless oaf sort of vocal tone he's got going on that I couldn't shake hearing it the entire time.
See, now you want me to see this movie with David Schwimmer just being Ross in the role instead, because I think that would actually be quite funny.
It would. He's the exact same character.
I mean, I don't know if I'd say he's the exact same character, but I can see what you're saying. I can see what you're saying.
I mean, even better if you bring in Ross's backstory into this movie and then say like, oh, and now Ross is dating this woman who's crazy. It's like all the better for his character.
Yeah, but we do know from this movie that this character is hung like a horse, and I refuse to accept that about him.
That's fair. That's something should be left untouched. I'll give you that.
And it is not left untouched.
I'm talking about David Schwimmer's thing should be left untouched.
Okay. In fact, in this movie, it's touched in record time, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. I mean, I don't really have much more to add before we get into spoilers, just except to say that I actually do think it's reasonably well paced.
All right.
Yeah.
The one thing I brought up that we didn't really touch on is the visual style and the musical style. What were your opinions on those?
I mean, the music, take or leave it. I don't think the music's a big part of it. It's like a little piano thing that it does, like you say, a little bit jazzy. I only really noticed it at the start and the end. I couldn't even tell you a single scene in the middle where it popped up.
It was playing like all the time. I guess it just fell into the background for you, but for me, I was just like, Jesus, man. It reminded me of the that one dance scene in Twin Peaks, the famous dancing. Yeah. I want to say it's Audrey. It was just that style of music the whole way through for me, but it was like a slimmed down convenience store version of it rather than something with any actual like soul to it for me.
Yeah, I can't say it's probably one of the more forgettable, least impressive parts of the movie. It didn't really do much for my ears. As far as visual style, I think the visual style is fine. I think it captures certain moments just right, but it's definitely going for a more subdued take, versus something like Basic Instinct, which is a lot more flashy. There's a lot more of a director's eye kind of capturing that. This is a bit more, I don't know, just kind of straight direction, I suppose, for lack of a better term.
Right.
I don't know if I would ever say it felt made for TV or anything like that, though, like you alluded to.
Okay, fair enough.
All right.
I'm
David's salty tonight, everyone.
I don't know what it is, man. I don't know what it is. You know what? Behind the scenes, I had to delay this recording by a day. I didn't have time to watch the movie before recording time yesterday, and I wonder if there's an alternate universe out there now where I did have enough time and it just hit me in the right way where I'm like, this movie was fantastic. I loved every second of it.
I'm curious, coming into the review, were you expecting me to be more on your side, or were you thinking I was going to line up with the movie-going audience at large?
I felt like I was going to be more negative than you, but I still expected you to at least like meet me in the middle.
Well, tough titty.
Yeah. Hey, yes, what I was expecting. That's all I had. Like I know that I'm coming into this with a much more negative eye, but oh well.
Yeah, all right. Spoilers for The Last Seduction, you have been warned. So, first bit of humor in this movie, I would argue, is Bill Pullman goes to the meetup point, right, under the bridge, and he's got these two, rough-looking individuals, right? They've got, like the fingerless gloves on, and they're coming up for this drug deal, and Bill Pullman's got his case with all the bottles of pills in it, and he's like, "Hey, there you go, boys. Have a gander at this." And
Pharmaceutical grade cocaine.
they open their case to show him the money, and he's like, "Ah, yes, lovely." And then they kind of like slap his hand away and close the case, or they pull the case back, and he starts like basically crying because, "Oh, of course you're screwing me over. Oh, I should have expected this."
Yeah,
Working
they pull out
with
a gun
criminals.
and aim it at him. Yeah.
Yeah, and then but the joke is that they just don't want to lose their case. They like their case, so they empty all the money onto the ground and walk away. So there's a great moment where Bill Pullman looks over. He's sort of like on his knees, like, "Oh, this is horrible." And then he looks over and sees the money, and he's like, "Oh, they left the money."
Pleasure doing business with you.
So he goes home with all the money stuffed into his shirt because he has no way of carrying it.
Yeah. And then meanwhile, we see what our lead girl was up to, where Bridget, for whatever reason, she is in I want to say call center, but it's like a sales thing, and they're trying to sell commemorative coins, and she's like the whip cracker who's just walking around telling people, like, you got to sell better than that. You got 2 minutes to make this sale. Come on, do it now.
I mean, it sounds like a scam.
Oh, yeah, obviously.
To be honest. Which kind of is her MO?
That was the, she offers up like $100 to anybody who can like make a sale by a certain time or something. And then this one guy gets it, and she's like, "Well, I can offer you $100 or $1,000 worth of these commemorative coins." And he's like, "I'll take the money."
The real money, the money that's currently legal tender. Thank you very much.
Right.
Yeah, so that's just kind of our introduction to the characters. And when she gets home, she waits on the husband. Bill Pullman, Clay, comes in, and she's like, "Did you get the money? Did you get money? Where is it?" And he starts whipping out the wads of cash out of his shirt. And she's like, "You're an idiot. You walked like that? What are you doing?
You walk like that through New York? What the hell?"
But the running thing here, though, is that obviously she's happy that he's got the money. He's happy that they've got the money. But he keeps trying to be intimate. He keeps trying to kiss her. He keeps trying to, like, sort of, feel her up or whatever, initiate sex. And every single time he goes to kiss her, she pulls away.
Well, the one thing that you skipped over there in the middle is the moment that she says, "You're an idiot," he backhands her.
Oh, yeah, that already happened. All right, fair enough.
Yeah. He backhands her, and he's just like, "How dare you?" And then as she's, sulking off to the side, he's just like, "Okay, hey, I'm sorry. High stress situation today. Didn't mean it. But we got the money, so everything's cool."
The purpose, do you know what I think the purpose of that slap is? I don't think the purpose is to give you a motivation for her, because like I said, I don't believe for a second that she wasn't planning this before that slap, right? I don't think that slap motivated the damn thing. I think the purpose of that slap is so that we don't feel bad for him. It's so that we can just enjoy him being made a fool as the movie goes on.
Yeah, because I think up to this point, they are just battling leads at this point. We don't really have an idea as to who's going to be the one we're going to be spending the movie with. But the moment you do that, you immediately side with her instead of him. Yeah.
This is actually kind of manipulative, almost in the way that she manipulates everyone around her. So very, very good. But yeah, she keeps pulling away. She acts like she's game to have sex. But she's like, "Oh, you smell a bit, though." So he goes to the shower, and she intentionally pulls out all the condoms, so there's an empty box, and leaves a note, notably written backwards, which is one of her character quirks.
That is the strangest character quirk I think I have. Like, it's one thing if you say, like, "Oh, yeah, this character's ambidextrous," or like, "Oh, this character can, like, do whatever." But, like, to say that they are able to write notes so that if you read them in a mirror, it's not just like the letters are placed backwards, they are physically reversed, and you can read the messages in a mirror. That's such a specific thing.
It seems like a party trick she spent a lot of time developing.
Seems like she spent some time on a lot of tricks.
But she leaves this note as an excuse as to why she's left. So when he comes out of the shower, he's like, oh, you dirty minx, so wait to get condoms, are you? But of course, it doesn't take him very long to sort of walk around in his towel and then go to where the money was and find that it's not in the bag that he was expecting to find it in. So she's actually only just left like the front door of the building, and he sees her running out in the street, and he starts yelling, whatever, like, "Oh, you'll regret this."
So you better run.
So she's skedaddled with the money. That's the setup of the movie, and she goes driving. She's on her way to Chicago, but we find out sort of over the course of the film, though, that she loves New York. She likes being in the city. She hates the idea of being in some small town place. Like, it sounds like she was going to make do with Chicago because it's another big city. It's still respectable enough, but really she wants to be in New York. And Bill Pullman knows that, and he's going to use that to try and crack this case and find her. But I feel like when we're talking about this movie, for the most part, I think we'll talk about it in two threads rather than going through it in order, because I feel like the way things bounce back and forth, I think try to go in order will be a nightmare. I think you sort of talk about everything with her and the husband and all the things he's doing to try and find her, and then you've got all the stuff with her actually building the relationship with Mike and Best.
You got the Bridget plot in New York,
and
you got the Wendy plot in Beston.
Wendy Croy.
Which seems like an out of nowhere name, but boy oh boy, does Bill Pullman figure it out quick.
Well, he sees the word New York in the mirror and realizes that she'd picked that name because it's New York backwards and she loves New York. I'll admit, like, him getting that exactly is a little bit of a stretch. I'm not going to deny that.
It's a little bit of a stretch, but I also would have much more appreciated this movie if it were just a cat and mouse game between the two knowing each other so well. Like doing like a Mr. and Mrs. Smith sort of thing where they just keep on battling against each other because they are aware of each other's tricks the entire time. But this is the only time it really comes out.
Well, I think the idea is that he knows a lot about her, at least everything she's like revealed during the marriage, because he actually was into her. I think the idea is that she doesn't really know him that well because she never cared.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, so like, I mean, we could I guess we can stick with the husband stuff first, and sort of like just sort of tackle all the things that he kind of does, because basically it amounts to a couple of things. Is one, she wants to move on, but she phones her lawyer for advice, her skeevy lawyer who's willing to give her some opinions, and says, hey, just in theory, if this money was stolen and I stole it from, a woman stole it from her husband and went on the run.
We remove this, put it into the double hypothetical.
Yes. She asked all these questions about it, and the lawyer, first thing he does is says, hey, do not buy any property, do not put it in a bank, because the second it's officially money on record, it means he's entitled to half of it in a divorce. So if you want to keep every penny of that money, you better keep it in cash.
Have you considered investing in commemorative coins?
So that's that. But he's also like, hey, don't go to Chicago. He'll look for you there because he knows you've got like a relative there or something. So,
yeah, I think they're saying something about a sister. So
stay in best in nowhere. Stay there, right? Don't draw attention to yourself. Use an alias. Keep on the down low until this all blows over, until the divorce is finalized. And she's like, how long is that going to take? Year, maybe 18 months if he really draws it out.
She's like, oh, okay, that sucks, and I can't do that, so I'm going to be looking for alternate means here.
Well, he says, can he afford a good lawyer? And she's like, not anymore. And the lawyer just sort of laughs and says, why did I ask? You always were a bitch.
I will say Bill Pullman is by far and away the most entertaining character for me, but this lawyer is, he steals the scene. Whenever he comes up, it feels like he's got a good character going on for him. Yeah,
it feels like, because there is like one allusion at one point that like her and him have had sex because she says something about his junk or whatever.
No, he said, she asked like, what did he say? And he says, well, were my lips moving too fast for you? And she says, not fast enough, if I recall.
So they've clearly had a fling, but on some level, she respects this guy enough that, or at the very least, she thinks he's useful in his lawyer capacity, that she's kept him in a friendly space, not pissed him off, so that he'll be useful to her. Maybe that's the logic or whatever it may be. Maybe he's just as skeevy enough himself that she respects the skeeviness. Not that she respects him as a good lawyer, but respects the hustle, respects like who he is.
I mean, that being said, it does look like he has a corner office in a New York skyline building. He seems to be doing pretty good for himself.
It's all that hustling.
Yeah.
He knows how to hustle.
But yeah, no, so she ends up sticking around. She gets a job in Beston, we get all the in-between stuff with what's going on in the other plot.
Yeah,
but
yeah. The main thing here is that the husband's trying to find her, and the lawyer says, "Hey, he keeps calling me. Phone him." So we get a whole song and dance of her phoning him, but like making sure that he can't trace the call by saying, "Hey, go to the payphone that's down the street," blah blah. But he tricks it, and it turns out he does have a private investigator sitting in the room with him, and he pretends like again, some of the funniest stuff in this movie is him like just jogging really fast in the apartment to make it sound like he's out of breath, like he's ran down to the payphone, and then he's like over at the phone trying to pretend that the traffic noises are like close by.
Yeah. They're basically just trying to come to a deal of like, okay, look, you signed the divorce papers, I'll give you like half the money or like less than half the money, something like that. Just
I don't think she offers
sort of
half. Let's be clear here.
No.
I think she's offering, I'll give you a 20 grand if you just sign the divorce. No fuss.
Yeah. Also, during all of this, we find out that the loan shark that Clay is under has started like breaking his thumbs every week that he's not delivering up on his interest.
Yeah, the loan shark bit's kind of weird to me because you never meet the loan shark and you never really like get any. I don't know. It's never fleshed out. It's just like this ominous thing off camera where this is why he needs the money right now, right? It's just to give him more urgency and wanting the money back. It's not just that he's mad that she took it. It's that he's in need of it. We also see that he has like this guy is the most unprofessional like doctor who's not even like made it to like complete like standalone professionalism yet. He's got a whole scam where like junkies will come into his house and they'll say, "Oh, I've got these symptoms," and he'll say the thing he's supposed to say is like, "Oh, have you tried this over the counter thing?"
Yeah.
Right. And the guy, this junkie in particular, sort of like, I don't know, he doesn't say the right thing, and his friend, a fellow junkie I assume, on the other side of the door says, "You're supposed to say it didn't work." He's like, "Oh, so it didn't work."
You're close. It's during a scene where the private eye is in the room, and the private eye's like, "I don't want to be a part of this. Just do your thing."
He's there too. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that's the private eye. Like as the junkie's stuttering through the script, where he's supposed to say like, "Oh yeah, I tried that. It didn't work," and he's not getting it. The private eye's just like, "You tried it. It didn't work, dumbass." Like he knows the script. He knows what he's supposed to say, and he's trying to remind the junkie.
Oh, I thought the junkie had a friend outside. Fair enough.
Yeah, that was definitely a private eye. Because it cuts over to him, and he's looking exasperated. He's like, "God, why do I get involved in this?"
Fair enough. If anything, that just makes it funnier. And then, of course, when he says it didn't work, well, I guess I have to prescribe you this now. And he gets his prescription pad out, he writes them the prescription and accepts money for it. Which, for the record, doctors don't usually receive money for the prescriptions themselves. Just,
this is 1990s, before we had any sort of code of ethics.
Look, he took a Hippocratic oath, right? This man is in need of something. He is providing it. He's providing a service, okay?
See, but that's where the loophole was. He didn't take the Hippocratic oath. He took the hypocritical oath. And that allows him to get away with anything.
Very good, very good. So, yeah. Ultimately, though, they get an area code, and because the name Wendy Croy is something that Bill Pullman pulls out his ass when he sees it in the reflection, they find her quite quickly. And I will leave this here for now, because when it comes back up later, it kind of, it spirals from there quite quickly into like the last chunk of the movie. So, but that's kind of just like what's going on in the sense that the husband's looking for her, wants to know where she is, and like all these like sort of comedy beats that take place when they're on the phone to each other or whatever. So
again, I really like the Bill Pullman parts. I'm not going to say that those are by any means a bad part of the movie. I think that they are funny, they're witty. Bill Pullman plays them with enough charisma to just load up the entire rest of the movie by himself. I think it's fantastic the way that all of his scenes are done.
Yeah, fair. I mean, I don't agree with the insinuation that the rest of it's not very good, but like I'm certainly not complaining about these scenes.
Look, I agree with Ebert in that these particular scenes are fantastic. He just thinks other scenes are also fantastic.
Yeah, so in the small town, right, she pulls over, she's out of fuel, and she sees a bar and goes in there, and that's when we're introduced to Mike. We actually see him before she walks in. It sort of cuts in before she goes in, and we get a little sense of what's going on with him, and he's talking to his friends. Turns out he's just moved back to this small town after trying to make it in Buffalo, which is really funny to me Like this whole thing that he doesn't want to be in this small town. He wants to be in a proper place like Buffalo, New York. Because I don't think
Yeah.
I've ever heard of Buffalo, New York being the place that someone aspires to go to.
I mean, you're right. I'm not gonna say that it's not the end all be all of New York. It definitely doesn't seem like that should be the place you aspire to.
It's just funny that, like, you know, Bridget's whole thing is that she wants to be in New York City, the arguably the most famous city in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike's aspirations is to get to Buffalo, New York.
I mean, in fairness, I think his aspirations, as stated in the movie, are much more of leave Beston.
True.
Like, it doesn't matter where he goes. It's just leave Beston.
True, but his attempt to leave failed spectacularly, and that attempt was in Buffalo, New York.
Yes. Which is more so indicating that he should not have gone to Buffalo. That is
possibly.
a bad idea.
Possibly. Or maybe you could read it as he didn't cut it out in Buffalo, so he'll be especially screwed if he ever goes to a real city.
Oh boy, here I am in whatever Wisconsin's freaking capital is. I couldn't even tell you.
Milwaukee?
That sounds right. Sometimes the capital surprise you, though. Like, the capital
sure,
of Maryland
but
is not Baltimore.
It's the only city I know in Wisconsin, so...
That's fair. Hold on, let me see.
That's not what I'm saying.
No, yeah. Oh, wait, hold on. Largest city is No, it's Madison. Madison, Wisconsin.
Never heard of it.
Yep.
Never heard of it. Also,
exactly.
For the two people who might be from Buffalo, New York, I mean no offense when I say real city.
For the two people in Buffalo, New York, please list anything that you do in the city. What is interesting about Buffalo?
Do they farm buffalo?
I don't think it's really a city job. I don't think you really do that.
Yeah, but the sentence buffalo, 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 buffalo is an accurate sentence that works. And it relies on buffalo from buffalo buffaloing other buffalo from buffalo while buffalo.
You know, I know what you're talking about. And like, I want to continue this conversation to some extent, but like, I don't have it in me.
I believe I know this fact because I think it's the longest sentence in the English language where it's just like you can repeat the word 6 times and it's technically a sentence that works.
I mean, I'm sure you could use that with anything that is a verb, a noun, and in place all at the same time. I don't know how many words fall under that, but I'm sure you could.
I don't know if there's any.
I mean, we could just come up with a place. You could just make up a fictional area, which means that all you need is a noun and a verb that are the same.
That's cheating. No. The point is this place is real.
Yes, the real city of Buffalo. Pete, what happens next in this movie?
All right, so we find out that he was in Buffalo. He got married very quickly, very briefly, and he's in the process potentially of getting a divorce, although it sounds like he's not officially actually done anything to do it. He's just ran away into the night and hoping that it'll go away.
Over the course of the movie, I kind of got the impression that it was like an annulment. Like, it happened so quickly afterwards that he just, he didn't even need to do a divorce. He just got it annulled.
The only reason why I say that, though, is because the way they act, because his friends say, "Oh, are you getting a divorce?" And he says something like, "Oh, yeah, I will, or I'll get around to it." He says something.
Oh, okay. I must have just missed that line.
Yeah,
then.
It's not past tense, whatever he responds to that question. So I think it's just because he's so ashamed of what actually happened that he's just like, he doesn't even want to like think about it, talk about it, be anywhere close to the subject.
Right.
Because obviously this comes up. This is sprinkled throughout the movie, like what happened with this, marriage in Buffalo. So in comes Bridget. She goes up to the bar, and immediately he is enamored. Oh my god, it's a city woman. This is not one of these small town floozies. This is a mature woman who knows what she wants.
I love the way that he's able to tell that she's a city woman as she comes up to the bar and says, "I'll have a Manhattan." And because she didn't say please, the bartender just doesn't acknowledge her. He just passes right over. It's just like, anybody else need any help? Anybody who's being nice? No? Great.
Yeah, he's especially dickish about it. And, he buys her the drink so that she has one, and he tries to talk to her, and she's like, F off, I don't want to talk to you. leave me alone. And he says, but I haven't finished charming you yet. And she's like, you haven't even started. So ultimately, his last ditch effort to make her interested is he just leans in and says, I'm hung like a horse. Think about it.
Which, I gotta tell you, it's a bold move, Cotton. Let's see how it plays out.
Well, I don't think he was expecting her to immediately check.
Mm-hmm.
Because she says...
Yeah, she just pulls him down to the table and says, like, all right, let's see it. And he's like, see what? And she just goes for the fly and is just like, all right, I'll feel around for it.
Yeah, and she does. And then she starts asking a few other basic questions about his sexual history and says, all right, fine, you pass, meet me outside, no names. And that's it. You know, we cut to them waking up next morning. I think what's interesting is this is probably the least erotic of the erotic thrillers we've done. Now, it does get, there's definitely more sex scenes later, but I think the thing that makes this like erotic more than sex scenes, and there's a little bit of nudity, but not a ton, is more just like how much the subject comes up and how the characters talk about it, more so than the acts itself.
Yeah, she's definitely a character who knows that her sexual appeal is one of her strongest weapons, and she uses it in just every capacity. Yeah,
she uses it in ways that are unfathomable at certain points. But yeah, like she's making calls about her husband and talking to the lawyer, whatever at his place the next morning. But she just leaves. She's not interested in like getting to know him, whatever. That's it. And it's worth mentioning that throughout all this one night stand, she thinks she's leaving the next day. And it's that phone call where she's like, "No, you need to stay in that town for a while. Like no one's going to think to look for you there." She's like, "Shit, I'm going to have to get a job," and gets a job at this insurance company, I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
because, you know, she's evil like that.
Well, she tells this sob story that she's on the run from an abusive husband. So can I use an alias while I work here? Like that. So the manager knows what her real name is because it's a job, but she'll be known as, and he's like, what do you want to be called? She's like, Wendy Cry.
With a K specifically, which to be fair, if she had not made that a K, I think she would have been able to last this entire movie. It was only her needing to make the anagram proper here.
The hubris.
It's a little OCD in a lot of ways, but whatever.
So it sets this up, and then much to her surprise, she runs into Mike at her job. He works there, and she's really uncomfortable with having to interact with them, and she pushes him into the bathroom and says, don't talk to me while we're here. Whatever happened last night was, as far as we're concerned, was just in your dreams. It didn't happen, and blah. And it's actually an interesting running thing, and I think it's one of the things that makes the movie kind of, even though she's like this villainous character who's done all these things, and like certainly by the end she's done some really bad stuff. I think this idea, like some of the things she points out, like even when she's like sleeping with them regularly, which happens quite quickly, she's adamant that it's not something they ever show or talk about at work, and her reason for it is that like half the respect, I can't remember, I think she said like 75% probably.
Something like that, yeah.
Of the respect that a woman has at the workplace disappears the second everyone else knows they're having sex with someone else who works there. And I was like, that actually feels like it's hitting on like a real interesting point. It's just that she's like got this strength that she's like A, aware of it, but B, like actually fighting it in a more proactive way where she's just blurting out maybe something that a lot of women think about when or maybe they've experienced because they have had a office romance, and then once it gets out it's like, reputation spreads, whatever.
It's an interesting point that it brings up, but I also feel like the movie doesn't do anything with it, because as far as it comes to her working there, she doesn't care about her reputation. I don't even think she does anything as she's working there. She just calls up her lawyer like 5 times and that's it. That's the only thing she does to work there.
I mean, it doesn't focus on the job too much, but I still think it was an interesting point to bring up. And it's kind of a foreshadowing as well, because she slaps Mike. Like, Mike sort of like touches her a little bit, which admittedly, inappropriate to do in the lobby of the workplace. But she turns around and slaps him and makes a scene out of it. And, Mike has to awkwardly walk in as like the receptionist, and some other people who are standing around kind of stare at him like, oh, you're a pervert.
Oh, you're a pervert. Yeah, there's a pervert in the building.
And, it's kind of awkward and all that, but it's definitely a bit of foreshadowing that she's willing to look like a victim in something like that to win in a situation. If anything, Mike should have read this as a humongous, screaming, beaming neon red flag. Like, this should have been something that warned him off.
I'm gonna go back a little bit further.
Yeah.
And say that the moment that the random woman jams her hand into your pants as you're sitting at the bar, maybe not mentally stable. Maybe just have a little bit of a caution as you go into this. And then the moment the next thing happens, slam the brakes.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but at least on that level, I understand that just being kind of hot.
All right. Secondary thing. As she's at his house the next morning after they sleep together, she pulls out a pie that his grandmother made because it has a note on it that says "Love Grandma," and she puts her cigarette out on it, a nearly full pie, and just leaves that sitting on the table as she walks out the door.
Yeah, we never get his reaction. We don't see him like find that. I presume he does at some point, but
you'd hope so. But
yes.
I feel like that would be the point of like, oh, she has no respect for me or anything that belongs to me. Well, that's not going to continue that.
Yeah, well, that's fair. But then they run into each other at the bar that night, and she has sex with him in the alley, and then in a car, in his car, I think, maybe her car, whatever.
I got the implication that this was supposed to be over like several nights. Maybe I'm incorrect on that, but.
No, there is definitely more sex on different nights that we kind of see parts of, but I think these two are the same night because I think they basically get interrupted and start like laughing in the alleyway, and then it cuts straight to the car. So I think the idea is that we'll go finish in the car.
Okay, fair enough.
I think that was the idea, but I think this is kind of a semi-famous scene though, where they're in the car because she asks him like a question like during the sex, and she's on top, and he says, "I'm still trying to decide if you're a total bitch." And then she says, "I'm a total bitch." Like, she sort of yells that out as she's having an orgasm.
Yeah.
And then laughs. And I think this arguably is like one of the most honest moments she has in the whole movie, is her laughing at her own self saying that in this situation. Again, the red flags. But hey, look, he's into a bad girl, okay? He's never had like a mean city lady before. He's excited.
As we discover throughout this movie, Mike is defined by his bad decisions that he makes. Like, I get it. I understand it from a character perspective, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to just shake my head disapprovingly every time he does it.
I mean, yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Mike is kind of hopeless in a lot of ways. He falls for everything. Like he's so... Like, anytime it feels like he's sort of trying to take back some control, and not in a bad way, like in ways he should be trying to take back some control, because he is just being used like a plaything. It still feels like, oh, like, you're not in control. Like, she's just going to turn this anger around into something for herself. There's a great scene later on where he storms out and yells at her, and she yells at him, but as soon as she shuts the door, she just starts giggling because everything's going to plan, and this is exactly where she wants him.
There's this running thing in the beginning of the movie where he wants to make this more than it is. He wants to like have her open up and share stuff with him and all that stuff. But in making it so clear and obvious what it is he wants from this, she's able to withhold it until the moment that it becomes advantageous for her, and then she starts fake opening up to him. Fake telling him things that he wants to hear, so that he's like, oh, see, now we're closer. Now I trust you more. That's
one of the things that really works with the movie for me, is that every single time there's like a sign that it's going to stop working and what's currently happening isn't going to keep him locked in anymore, that's when she'll intentionally do something, whether it's open up, leave a note with a love heart on it with her name, because there's that bit later on where he's like crying over the phone saying, oh, I can't stay with you, like, if I knew that somehow you love me. And then he runs over to like steal the answer machine tape because he thinks she's out of town, but she isn't. It was all a lie. It's part of her plan. We'll get to the greater plan in a bit, but yeah, she's like intentionally left like a note with like a love heart with their names in it, and
literally a high schooler's like notebook style of like little arrows going through it, and like her writing his last name next to her name.
But it's perfect though, because now he thinks, oh, she does love me, but she's too like, you know, walled up to actually say it, but she secretly loves me, and I know it now, but obviously this is a plan. In fact, she's literally
Yeah.
hiding under the bed as he comes in and finds this note, like
Yeah.
beside her, or
Nice to him.
I was gonna say or answer machine, but yeah, sure on the
Oh,
next
yeah.
stand. So yeah, like all these little bits and like the sort of the cause and effect of like, okay, he's starting to pull away or he needs to be convinced of something, uh, like. But I mean, to get to like sort of further down the line though, and get into like the actual plan
Mhm.
that starts to form, is there's a scene where she's talking to him, and he mentions, I take pride in my work, I do a lot of important things, and she's like, yeah, like what? And he mentions this payout, because some husband was an asshole or died, but then like he had like some secrets, and she's like, what do you mean secrets? Like, well, you can tell from his credit reports and some of his details that, oh, he's got like credit cards, like an other woman's name, but not his
Mhm.
wife's. Like, he clearly was up to something. He was clearly cheating. And she's like, huh, this sounds useful. We can do something with this.
Come to me, my puppet. We are going to go do nasty things.
So they go back to the office and he shows her like a list of all the people who would fit in a criteria, which is wealthy men who have a wife but have other apartments on, the wife and the others don't know about, because their names aren't on it, has other credit cards that maybe other people can use. And then she wants to phone some of these wives, although the first two are duds because one's asleep, the man answers, and so on and so on.
Mhm.
But eventually it's like, oh, I just want to see if I can sell like an idea or like, rile up the woman. But this morphs into this idea that she wants to sell murder to scorned housewives and say, hey, I can have someone kill your husband for a hefty fee. And all this is to eventually get to the point where Mike is going to potentially kill her husband to get that out of her life. That's what the end goal of this is.
Yeah, it is ridiculously circuitous in the way of we almost pull an Inception where she plants this seed of like bad people deserve to be killed, but like not really, haha, just joking. However, she found one that was like particularly heinous, and she fakes that she went and got this guy actually
Yeah,
killed.
she got a fake, or she didn't get a fake. She bought a real plane ticket so that it would
Mhm.
look like she went and she was out of town. What she was actually doing when she went out of town, though, was she went to Buffalo to meet Trish, because by this point in the movie, she's actually had Mike open up about his marriage a little bit, and he doesn't want to
Mhm.
talk about it. And she even throws that back in his face. She's like, "Hey, you're the one that wanted to open up. Why aren't you talking about Trish?" And he's like, it was a mistake. I don't want to talk about it, right? It was a stupid drunken night and no more, right? And she's like,
Mhm.
are you still in love with her? And he's like, no, definitely not. And, goes away. And actually, the very first time they interact, one of the questions she asks when she's like saying, hey, your sex history, this, she says, okay, how many partners? He says 12 or whatever. And
Mhm.
then she says,
Like how many of them were
yeah,
prostitutes?
he's like, none. Have you ever had sex with a man? And he sort of reacts and says, no, definitely not. And in the moment, it just feels like he's offended because it's the 90s and I'm not gay. Like,
Also, currently he's being felt up under the table. I feel like any reaction at that point be like, no, what?
yeah, for all we know, she's pinching him in, in this
Yeah,
moment,
no, ow, stop. But don't.
right? So she's gone on this recon mission to Buffalo to find Trish, right? Goes to like the records office and says, hey, there was a marriage here, first name Trish, last name, whatever Make's last name is,
Mhm.
and gets information, steals a clipboard so she looks like she's an official of some kind, like taking notes, and goes to interview Trish. And we don't get to see this interview really. We get a glimpse of Trish, like at the door, but not too much. And we
Mhm.
just get basically Bridget coming back to the taxi afterwards with a smirk on her face, like she's got a smoking gun. Like, oh, the emotional manipulation that I needed. Like, I've got it right. I've found something. Yeah, which actually at this point I'm going to mention the second private eye that is
Okay.
employed to just follow, or just not even, well, he's employed to follow her. We never see him follow her though, because every time he's going to follow her, she's outwitted him in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Just
The
this,
first time she like delivers cookies to his car, drops one of them, and then puts a little thing of nails under his tire so it blows out when he goes to pull away.
It's a homemade
And then-
spike trap.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the second time is right before they're about to leave, her and Mike to go do the final act of the movie. She calls into the cops and says like, "Oh, there's a man outside my house that tried to show his thing to my daughter. Please send a car." And so as they're leaving, he's being arrested by the cops.
Yeah. The first PI, though, was the one that was actually with Bill Pullman in some scenes earlier on. He shows up, and it's actually kind of an interesting point where it's just as she's starting to suggest all the murder stuff to Mike, and Mike's like, "Wait, this isn't a joke. You're crazy. Why are you asking me this? No, I'm going to go play hockey. Leave me alone." And he storms out, and she's like, "Hey, no, don't leave me alone. I'm actually starting to get kind of scared." And she kind of means it at this point in the movie. Even though she's never that vulnerable, she knows there's a chance that the call was traced before this.
There was a scene, and I need to discuss this scene.
Oh, no. I know what you're going to bring up. Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay.
We're going to bring up the receptionist and how she phrases something particular. Yes. So, yes. She goes into work probably earlier that same day. And the receptionist says, "There was a black man here to see you." The PI is black, right? For context here. Right?
Yeah.
"There was a black man here to see you." And she's like, "Oh, did he say what you wanted?" "No, he was black though." And it's like, "Oh,
And
thanks."
she's like, "Okay."
And she walks away, and then this like sort of like, I don't know, like junior like copy boy,
Like
like
an
sort of,
intern dude, yeah.
wheels in behind him with his trolley and goes, "Did you tell her about the black man?" And I'm like, this is so 90s. Like, is Buffalo, New York just got no black people in it?
First off, it's not Buffalo. It's
Sorry.
Beston.
Yeah, it's Beston.
And correct, Beston does not have black people in it.
That's true. Yes, it's actually quite smart though. As much as it's a silly little kind of joke about how these small town people are like just not used to anyone, it's actually a little bit of a setup for a payoff that comes soon. So after Hockey Mike has stormed off, right?
That's his name now, Hockey Mike.
Hockey Mike. She is immediately accosted by the PI. She gets into her car, and the PI just comes in. He's got a gun, and is like, "Hey."
I like she pulls out some mace, but then he pulls out a gun, and she's like, "Well, I've been bad here. Here you go."
Yeah. And it's like, "Okay, I guess it got found. The game was, well played, but this is it. This is the end of the line. I'm taking you back to the husband. Here we go." But obviously that doesn't go as planned.
Yeah, she says something along the lines of like, "Oh, I don't have the money here at home. It's somewhere else, but it's in the bank. I won't be able to get it out to the morning, but you can call and get my account from a payphone if you want that." And they do so. He goes and checks and says like, "Well, that was nothing. I bet you were just hoping I was going to leave the keys in the car, huh?" And she's like, "Yep." And then she eventually breaks down and says, "Yeah, the money's back at home." And as they start driving home, she looks down at her dashboard and sees a little note that says, "Driver's side airbag included." And you just see the wheels start turning.
Yeah. So, yeah, her first attempt to sort of one up him does not work, right? But then the second attempt is like, okay, how can I get him to take his seatbelt off, right? That's effectively what her plan is now. And again, the subject always comes back to sex, where she's like, "Hey, is it true what they say about black men?" And he's like, "Shut up. Just drive."
I like how he's not buying into it. I like how he's just like, "I know you're playing me. I'm not doing this."
Yeah, I'm not going to do this Freudian stuff. And she keeps saying rampant. It's like, "Oh, well, I guess that's why you carry a gun around. You must be compensating. You must feel, emasculated all the time." And he's like, "This ain't going to work. Keep driving." And she basically just annoys him into it, where eventually he's like, "Look, will you shut up if I just show you?"
There's the third one of, "I'll show you mine if you show me yours, but you got to go first."
Yeah, and then he's like, "I don't want to see your bony ass."
Yeah, because that was his comeback. He was like, "Is it true about black guys?" And he's like, "Is it true about white women?" And she's like, "What? That they have no ass?"
So yeah, basically she's like, "Hey, just look on, let me see it. Let's go on." And eventually, just to shut her up, because I don't know if I ever even got the impression at all that he was attracted to her and was falling for this in a seduction way. This was more of a, okay, I just need to end this line of conversation immediately. So he takes his seatbelt off to like whip it out, And of course, what does she do? She speeds up and then drives right into like a electrical pole or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And he goes flying out the window. That he dies from his injuries, maybe not instantly, but we find out he's died afterwards.
Yep.
Cut to her in the hospital, and this is what I was getting at when I was saying that earlier sort of like comedy scene about the receptionist, like sort of being really nervous, the fact that there was a black man in the building, is that she has heard the locals and how they talk about someone who is black. She understands that they are racist, right? Whether via just ignorance or actual, ill contempt or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? There's racism here, and she exploits that in this scene with this detective who's asking her questions, because he's asking questions and he's like, yeah, he stormed into the car, he had a gun, blah, blah, blah. And then, when I said I didn't have the money or whatever, he started mother effer this and mother effer that. Yeah. And the detective's like, oh, like the movies? And she's like, yeah, I like the movies. And like, so she's playing on the idea that these small town folk are going to be racist to paint a picture so that he will not question for a second that she is completely a victim in this scenario, and will not even just consider the idea that she might have done anything wrong.
I mean, I'll give the movie a lot of credit in how it sets up this stuff, is that it does a very good job of saying, whatever the situation is, she has a way of explaining every detail of it. Like, they bring up the point of like, hey, his pants were like halfway down when they crashed. Can you explain that? And she gives a perfectly reasonable explanation as to why that would be happening right then. And it's well written in that regard.
Yeah. So this is all good. And, Mike shows up with flowers afterwards, and he's like, I still feel kind of weird about that whole you asking me to murder someone for money thing, but like, obviously I'm upset that you're hurt. So
yeah, like I still care about you. I think at this point they may have said I love you, or that might be later on, but
I think he said it. I think she's,
still using that as a carrot.
Yeah. So yeah, because there's been a few other scenes with them, like, before the whole like talking about Trish scene, like they had sex before that. And then they started having sex in the shower after. So there is pockets of little bits of sex throughout as well, if you want the erotic quota to be up for your erotic thriller. Honestly, though, I feel like, just her vibe and how she uses sex as a weapon is more of what makes it feel erotic to me, rather than any of the actual sex itself.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They specifically say in one of the trivia bits on IMDb is that this is one of the few movies that Fiorentino did up to this point that didn't have just like full frontal. And I'm like, well, I feel like this is the one that should have had it if it were trying to hit the erotic thriller mark. But like you said, it's in how she acts, everything about that.
So you went and rented all of her previous movies then for research purposes, is what you're saying?
Look, there's a reason that I couldn't record yesterday, Pete.
It's funny though, because it is actually a lot more tame compared to Basic Instinct in terms of what it shows. And even to an extent, single white female. It's closer, but that definitely showed a bit more.
This one feels just, again, the tone, the idea that she is a woman who knows that she can use her sexuality as a weapon, and she does so all the time.
Yes. So, no, I mean, this still isn't quite working. But obviously there's the reveal later on when he comes in and sees the airplane ticket and, makes all these...
Yeah, this is just after all the answering machine and finding the love note stuff.
Yeah, because I think it's between this scene and then that stuff where she goes on her trip to Buffalo, right? So that's where that takes place. Because obviously the second PI's there watching her house because the first one has met his demise. In fact, one of the funniest scenes with Bill Pullman actually is when she's on the phone to him. Because at this point he knows what town she's in, so there's no reason to hide it. So she's just on the phone to him talking, negotiating a little bit. And he's obviously pissed that the PI is dead. And he says, "Oh, you know what? I hired like a reasonable, nice PI to come find you. Now I'm going to hire some depraved asshole who's going to skull F you afterwards just for fun." But the way he screams it as he says it's quite funny because he's clearly pissed.
He's super angry about this, and that's where she's just like, "All right, you've got $10,000 of interest building up every week. I'll give you $15,000 just to calm you down, and then we can discuss this like civilized people."
Yeah, I don't think he gets a penny of that money for the rest.
No, not at all.
Because what's you going to do? Post it? You'll post 15 grand. What's the postman's going to have a nice day?
Get some taxes on that.
So, yeah. Basically, he finds this airplane ticket, says, wait, did you go to that, like, I think it was Miami, the guy was supposed to be living in, the fake guy. It's like, did you go to Miami and kill this guy? Tell me. And she pulls out her suitcase and shows the money she get paid for it. But obviously, this is just the money she stole from Bill Pullman at the start of the movie. But she sells this convincing story that she did go and murder someone, and she doesn't feel sorry because he was evil, he was horrible. And that now, to prove that Mike is committed, he has to kill the next one. And she's got just the pick. He lives in New York, believe it or not.
Yeah. Well, the in-between there, the tiny little thing that just gives the hiccup in there, where Mike has to, he has to come back like a sad little puppy just trying to get back in good graces, is he pulls out the love note and is like, I know that you care about me. I know that you're just hiding it deep down. Like, you don't have to do this. And she immediately turns and is just like, you were in my house? What the hell is wrong? Get out of here. I never want to see you again. And just shoves him out the door. So, of course, he then has to come back, doubling down on his, of course I'll do it for you if that's what it's going to take.
But then she giggles as soon as she shuts the door. Like, this is exactly the scene that she wanted to play out. Interestingly, though, he comes back to sort of try and make amends at the office. Like, he comes into her office, and he still says no, he's not going to kill someone, right? He's still not going to do it. So this is when she's like, okay, I have to whip out the nuclear weapon. And and I love that we don't know what she's going to do here, but there's this intent in the performance as she whips out just like a notepad, right, and starts writing something. And I'm like, but you can tell from her body language and the way she's doing it that she's like, okay, all right, the big gun's coming out then. And it turns out what this is a letter to Mike from Trish, quote unquote, that says, hey, I'm moving to Beston so I can be close to you. I got a job at
your company. I'm going to be right there with you, elbow to elbow.
We don't have to tell anyone about our secret or our past. I'll keep it to myself, but I want to be close to you. And this is like, again, this like masterclass manipulation of being like, hey, you're scared of anyone finding out that you married a man, and you are not going to, so he immediately comes over to Bridget and says, hey, I'll do it. I'll kill him. I'll kill the guy. On one condition, we never come back to this stinking town ever again.
And she's like, why are you so concerned? Okay, whatever, if that's what you say.
Yeah, it's masterfully played, and then that leads us into the last chunk of the movie.
Yeah, and this is where, from my perspective, where it really picked up for me, when all this stuff, I will fully give props. Where it's funny, where it does a clever bit, it does a clever bit. For me, it's just like us talking about it. We are talking about the clever bit specifically, but there's so much space in between where it doesn't feel like anything is happening for me. It feels way too slow, way too, again, it feels like it's 50 minutes before we get that bit of him saying like, oh, in the industry, I'm able to see like people's credit reports. And then she gets that sort of idea. It just takes too long to get there for me. And I'm already kind of checked out by that point.
I just disagree. I think it's very well paced. I think it's funny pretty consistently. But the main thing I'll disagree with there is that I don't think I consider that point where that first comes up like something the movie needed to get to sooner. I don't know. I think everything before that was just as important and as valid as part of the story. So
I like the stuff that's earlier on. Again, Bill Pullman for all that stuff, the PI stuff that's going on, the part where he's running in the apartment. I love all of it. But I just don't think that, based off of what the story becomes, it feels inconsequential in a lot of ways. It feels like we're telling a completely different thing, and then all of a sudden, at this midpoint, we get the master plan starts coming together.
No, it absolutely is consequential to it, because this is why she has to kill him, right? She has to find a way to get rid of him totally, because even the little effort to, okay, I'll give you a little bit of the money for a divorce, is met with him tracing the call. It's met with him trying to find her. All of it's to build up that, no, the only way she gets out of this with every penny is to get rid of him. It's building the motivation. I do think it has a purpose. So, okay. Yeah, so she basically has devised a plan for him. Hey, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go with the name, right? And worth mentioning, she has went in advance and put the fake name of who he's going to kill, right? And the buzzer for the building, right? So it's when he sees that name, it's the name that he's been told for Bill Pullman.
Yep. It's Cahill, I believe.
Yeah, and she makes a whole thing about, oh, to make sure you turn the light off after you've done it. And the reason why she wants him to do that is because she's going to be watching from the outside and wants to know when it's done. But that's not the reason she gives him. It's some other thing.
She says like, oh, it's a psychology thing of if you turn off the light, then it's you like putting it to bed and you don't need to worry about it anymore. It'll help you get over the trauma or whatever. But then later on, like Bill Pullman's like, hey, if she's here in New York, which I'm like reasonably sure she is, she's going to be waiting for a signal.
Let's get to the because one of the funniest moments of this movie for me is Mike is psyching himself up. He's walking through the street. He gets into the building. He goes up. He's got the key because Bridget had one, and he's like, hey, and he go, and he comes in. He's sneaking through the house. He hits Bill Pullman. He ties him up. He gets him in the chair, and
he knocks him with the gun. Says like, I'm robbing you. Get up. And he's like, oh, I thought you were the new decorator.
Yeah, Bill Pullman's funny even when he has no reason to think he's not in danger here. But he gets tied to the chair. He gets gagged. He hits him in the back of the head again, and he's holding the blade to his neck. He's trying to psych himself up. It's going to happen. Bill Pullman shuts his eyes. And then Mike just throws the blade down and says, I can't do it, Wendy, I can't. And then it goes to a close-up of Bill Pullman's face, and he's like, oh no. Like, in the way he clearly yells Wendy in an angry voice whilst gagged, absolutely broke me. It is legitimately hilarious.
It felt to me like something out of like a Flintstones cartoon or something. Like he just heard like, Bonnie!
That's the thing, I think one of this movie's biggest assets, other than the lead performance, is just how funny it is. Like, it is still a thriller, but it's a very humorous, dark comedy of a thriller. And it's constantly got things like that to kind of like pepper in and sort of enjoy. You get to enjoy the absurdity of it a little bit. This is not a movie where you're supposed to be like, oh, I feel the real turmoil and like I'm supposed to feel bad that this is that. Like, by its nature, this movie does not want you to be overly sympathizing with anyone. It wants you to be enjoying the chaos and enjoying what the lead character's doing to them.
I mean, if anything, I think that the sympathetic undertones are supposed to go towards Mike, but even then it's a little bit like
even then
iffy.
I don't know. Because I think so obviously, like, all right, like Bill Pullman like hobbles over to like a photograph of him and Bridget and like knocks it over with his nose so that Mike will look at it, and he's like, wait a minute. So he takes the gag out. He's like, all right, speak. And he's like, she's my wife. She's conniving. She hired
took all my money and she left, and I'm guessing she conned you into thinking that this is gonna, or she hired you to kill me. But then he
realizes, and he's like, no, wait a minute, you're into her, aren't you? Oh, you're a sap. She's lured you in. This was all part of her plan. And oh, there's a way to signal her, right? And it's like, oh yeah, the lights. So they realize the lights turning off as a signal, so they turn the lights off. She's watching outside, and
although real quick before any of that, he specifically tells Mike like, hey, you were always going to be the fall guy here. Like the plan was she's going to come up and she's going to find me dead, and she's going to point to you as the murderer because your prints are on things, you have motivation, you had all this stuff, you definitely were going to take the fall for her. Mike is like, that's probably not true.
Right, so she comes up in the dark and they do a whole thing where they flip the lights on, and Bill Pullman's still alive, although he's still handcuffed to his legs, right? He's still sort of like bound.
Yeah, Mike doesn't have the keys.
But he's sitting there with a smirk in his face. Mike's just sort of really sad in the background holding the gun. And he's like, this was almost perfect, Bridget. You almost did it. You almost got away with this. You had this asshole come in, and he was the perfect fall guy. And she's like, don't listen to him. And he's like, no, that's your case with your belongings. You're going to tell the police that you were here to patch things up. You were coming back to your husband and you found me dead. That's what the plan was, wasn't it? So very quickly, she chooses to kill him herself with pepper spray mace right into the mouth, right, to choke him. And he dies. Mike's obviously freaking out. He's like, you're crazy. Why did you do this? And then the next part, and this is the thing, I don't think this part was necessarily planned. I think this was the quick thinking, because the plan to, just find the dead body and blame Mike fell apart.
I think from the moment the lights got flipped back on and she realized that Clay wasn't dead, that is all 100% just quick thinking of like, all right, what do I have to work with and what's my end goal?
Yeah, obviously she wipes the mace like spray down after she's used it, so it's like, okay, she's thinking about her own fingerprints. That makes sense. I mean, obviously her fingerprints can be on everything else in the house because she's used to live here,
Yeah.
right? But Mike's like, no, you just killed him, man. I can't live with that. Like, I have to call the police. And as he's going for the phone, she says, Trish was never coming to Beston. And he turns and he's like, what? It's like, yeah, it must have been a whale night if you married a man. And like really drives it home, rails him up as she's literally starting to pull out her shirt and like undress.
Yeah, every line that she's saying about Trish, she's interjecting with a word that YouTube does not like, to imply forceful sexual stuff. And she's saying like, hey, do it. Just do it. Just do it with me right now. And he's like, you are absolutely crazy. But with every single passing line about Trish, he's getting more and more riled up and like willing to try to hurt her in some way.
Yeah, she's basically saying, I mean, I don't mean saying it once. I don't think YouTube's going to freak out too much, but she's basically saying, you want to rape me. And he obviously doesn't want to, but like she keeps railing him up, and he eventually gets so angry that he does grab her, sort of put her over the desk, and she is acting obviously somewhat into it because she's goading him into doing it.
Yeah, but she's also saying like, imagine I'm Trish, like, yeah, really getting revenge for that.
Right, and really, yeah, rubbing all this in and rubbing in all this stuff that he's insecure about. Obviously, he's went through this, and she dials 911 on the phone that's on the desk as this is happening. And as soon as she's dialed the number, she starts saying the opposite. She starts saying, "What are you doing?"
She starts getting into the role.
Yes, she starts playing the victim so that the phone operator can hear, and the phone operator's, I'm tracing your call now, ma'am, and like, and he's even saying out loud, do you want me to do this? I'll do it. And he's yelling it over and over again.
And she's throwing in stuff like, you killed my husband, you killed my husband. And he's like, damn right I did.
Right, and this to me is like her thinking quick on her feet to be like, okay, how do I make this look like I am completely the victim? And I think all those previous incidents in the movie, the him slapping her on the ass and then her slapping him in the face and making a big scene out of it, in the car with the PI, and then the story like, oh, he was going to do things, he was scary, like this, like reverting to playing the victim has been like getting bigger and bigger throughout the movie until this, where it's just straight up she's going to make this look like sexual assault. And there's going to be evidence, there's going to be fluids, there's going to be all of the things that are needed to, forgive the phrase, finger Mike in this crime. And, sure enough, that's what happens. It just cuts ahead, and Mike's like behind bars. He's getting visited by his lawyer, and he's like trying to say to his lawyer, hey, no, she did this and she did that. She's evil and she's genius and she did all these things.
Yeah, I love how it specifically takes the very few loose threads that are left over, and like Mike brings them up and says like, what about this? And the lawyer's just like, this is how a jury's going to see it. It ain't beneficial for you, man. Yeah,
the one thing, the couple of things that you mentioned is that I thought were interesting was like, he tries to tell the lawyer about that night they were making phone calls using the information from like the insurance company system, and the lawyer's like, it doesn't matter what happened that night, you do not want a jury hearing about that because they will not trust you after they hear about any of that. Also, it came from your office phone. Like, even if we could find that she was the one making the calls, it was from your phone. You're implicit. Yeah. And then something like, oh, she stole all that money from her husband, and he's like, yeah, but he never reported money being stolen, and we know why, because it was stolen in the first place. It was dirty money. But like, none of the stuff is there to back up his story. And he's like, hey, it sure is not anything, not one thing that would corroborate what you're saying about her. And he's like, wait a minute, I think there's one thing. And it cuts to the final scene of the movie, which is presumably the thing he thought of. Bridget is disposing of as we see the end of the movie. She comes away from the apartment building. It was the name tag, the fake name tag in the buzzer, and she burns it as she drives off in a fancy town car, clearly enjoying the money that she now has to herself. Yep. And the movie wraps up there. Again, I really, even before anything else, I really like this ending. I think it does a good job of keeping all of those plates that were spinning earlier, bringing them together and saying, like, here's how it all worked out. I think it does do a good job of
like you said, those little bits where she was playing the victim, even though they were fake stories, it just builds and builds until finally it crescendos here to get to this absolute like masterstroke to her plan.
I think what's so funny about it to me, I say funny, not funny, interesting to me, is that the villain, who is a protagonist admittedly, but she wins, and that's the ending. And it actually feels like the best possible outcome in a lot of ways. I think the audience, by and large, is going to be entertained by the fact that she got away with it. She thought of every detail. And I think part of that, like we talked about the husband earlier, like him slapping her at the start of the movie made it clear that he's not a good guy, so we can just kind of enjoy what happens to him. And I think with Mike, it's a little bit more complex, but I think him not being able to actually deal with what he went through in Buffalo and being a coward about it is why on some level you can kind of like not feel that bad for him either, right? Like his own insecurities to some extent are why he was able to be taken advantage of this much. And that's before you even get to, you know, looking at this in a sort of modern lens and maybe like, you know, I imagine when this was written at the time, like the general attitude towards, you know, a trans woman or,
Yeah.
or you know, if that is indeed what she is, it's kind of vague in the movie exactly.
It's either transsexual or transvestite, one of the two.
And it definitely seems like he had that marriage when he was drunk, and as soon as he realized what had happened, he just ran away, which makes him kind of a coward. And like, you know, like I get that, yeah, it'd be emotionally affecting if he hadn't intended on doing that, but you know, should have dealt with it, should have faced it, should have, you know, not just ran away from his problems, which goes back to the start of his character, which is he wanted to run away from the town that he just wants to get away from, you know. So he's kind of, you know, he's definitely not a bad guy in the same way that Bill Pullman's character is, but there's a lot of little qualities there that kind of hint that, oh, we can't really get behind him either. He's not just this purely sympathetic character.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely not purely sympathetic by the end of it, but I think that it's in the beginning of his character, you are supposed to see him as purely sympathetic. You see a guy who's down on his luck, his friends are trying to console him, and he's just talking about, you know, wanting to find it bigger, wanting to do whatever. Yes, there is this aspect that he's running away from his problems, but I don't think that that's something that the audience is specifically meant to look negatively on. I think more primarily what takes away the sympathy from him is how Bridget/Wendy corrupts him over the course of the movie, and how she just fully gets involved with him. Because there's one scene we skipped over where one of his friends basically comes up and says like, hey, Wendy like talked to me in the parking lot, and like a bunch of stuff that was plot relevant, but then he threw on the thing of like, and then she offered to like suck me off, and he gets super pissed, immediately throws punches, the guy's bleeding out like the mouth and the nose, until he finally admits that he made it up and that wasn't true. But that doesn't feel like something that the character at the beginning of the movie would have done. It feels like that's something that she brought out in him.
Oh, yeah, fair. But I don't think I meant to say that he, like, his negative qualities are slowly unveiled throughout the movie. It's not like Bill Pullman's character, and that you're meant to know what you don't like about him immediately, right?
Right.
But I don't think that's a problem. I think that's kind of the point. I think the most unlikable he gets is right at the moment where we find out what he ran away from, and that's right before the big thing at the end, right? It's the build up to that action, right? It kind of crescendos up along with her plan. Finding out about him also crescendos at the same time. So
I wouldn't say that's where I find him most unlikable. I think most unlikable for me is the moment where he's going over the plan of how he's going to kill Bill Pullman's character, how he's going to go through all that. I think in the moment that's revealed why he ran away, that's more of showing just how broken he is and why she's able to take these next steps here, of why she's able to force him into all these horrible situations.
I think that's splitting hairs a little bit because they're very close together in the movie. It's literally the build up to that same scene. But the point I'm making though is that it crescendos in the scene as the emotions heighten, and his reaction to it being so violent, the fact that he's even willing to do this role play in this heat of the moment, right? Like if he was a good person, he would ignore what she's saying and just call the damn police.
Oh yeah.
Right? But he doesn't. He gets angry. He plays into exactly what she's doing.
Yeah.
So I think there is kind of like a. Don't get me wrong. I think out of the three lead characters, and it feels like a stretch even calling Bill Pullman a lead character. He's definitely supporting. He's the main supporting character, but he is supporting. I do think Mike is the least interesting of the three characters for sure.
Yeah.
But he serves his purpose. I mean, I guess. By
Yeah,
and
no, I
large.
mean for what the story is, I agree. I think he's absolutely a character who's supposed to be essentially the tool at which Bridget uses to make everything else happen. He's just there to be used, and in order to do so, he kind of does have to be this hapless oaf of a character who just, for whatever reason, whether it's stupidity, whether it's blind love, whatever the character happens to be in the story, he's just going to go along with it. He's just going to say, yeah, all right. He may put up mild resistance, but we all know the story cannot progress if he does not go along with whatever the femme fatale's plans are.
Yeah, but you can't really fault it for that though, because then there's no movie.
I'm not faulting for it at all, but it does make him a passive character. It doesn't make him have any active decisions in his own right. He is completely at the whims of the other more major characters going on. So it's hard to see him as a strong character because of that.
Yeah, but I think that's fine because he isn't the protagonist. If the protagonist was like that, that would be a big problem. But we're following the villain effectively of the story. So
I mean, I think it's more apt to say, because this does pick up many traits from like a film noir sort of thing. It does basically just follow the femme fatale. It does, instead of, if we're following the format of a classic noir, Peter Berg's character would be the detective. He would be the person who gets wrapped up in this, and he may not want to, but he's, entranced by the woman. This is just flipping that script a little bit and instead focusing on the femme fatale and like following her setting the pieces up instead.
That's fair. I just mean villain in the sense that she is the one trying to do the main bad thing in the movie. I don't really mean anything other than that.
Right.
But I think it's a compelling performance. It's constantly funny to me and entertaining. I'm not trying to give it like super high marks or anything necessarily. It's not perfect, right? It's not like there's definitely. I mean, I think if Mike was a more interesting character, it probably would even go a bit further. Maybe a little bit more visual flair, perhaps. But for the most part, though, its sense of humor does mostly work for me, and I found myself smirking or chuckling, a reasonable amount throughout it. So
no, I'd agree. I think that I am holding a little bit more against it for you in terms of I wish that it had a distinctive visual style, or it just felt like it was a bit more artistically driven than just as economic as it felt. But I will fully agree that the humor was the one thing that was at least keeping me engaged in the movie. As much as I disliked the pacing or whatever, the fact that they did have those little snarky remarks and it felt like every character had a witty banter just running throughout, it's something that's working very well for the movie as a large.
Well, it's interesting having a character in the movie, that being Bill Pullman's character, who knows that Bridget's the femme fatale and hates her for it. Like, it's a very interesting dynamic that comes in. Like, maybe in a classic noir, you'd have a character eventually show up and say, hey, she's dangerous or something, but you wouldn't have a character right from the very start being like, I don't trust that bitch. Like, she's the devil.
But I mean, that's playing with the structure itself, because even if we didn't have Bill Pullman, we see from the very first shot of her how she is an unlikable person, and she's brutal to everyone that she meets and just uses them. So even without Bill Pullman's thing, it's just messing with the structure of the film noir to present it from this different vantage point.
Yeah. And I think the tone shift that goes along with that was a wise move. I think if you tried to play this straight and serious, I don't think it would work either. I think it's supposed to, it's supposed to be a bit sexy. It's supposed to be a little bit funny, mischievous, I guess is another good word. I think those are the vibes that it's kind of going for. And for the most part, I think it works. So, yeah.
Yeah. For me, I think I just would have liked either a little bit more conflict if we were going to go with the idea that she is an absolute mastermind and can always just manage to know how to do things the right way. I'm okay with that in certain settings, but I think I would have liked to see it play a bit more immediate. like have smaller, shorter term payoffs of showing exactly how this is working for her, rather than the entire back half of the movie more or less just being the long game. Like I would have liked to see, like I got a real kick out of the bit with her driving the car to kill the private eye, because that was a very quick setup, her figuring out how she can work this guy to get him to die basically, and then doing it. I think that that was the kind of, if we had that just maybe not repetitively, but that kind of structure throughout the rest of the movie, I would have been a bit more into it.
Yeah, I just don't have those critiques, I guess.
Right.
I think it's paced pretty well. So, with that said, what is your
Mhm.
favorite scene of the movie?
Uh, favorite scene in the movie. I feel like it's got to come at the ending. I don't think anything else really stood out to me as like a major moment. Otherwise, no, actually, looking through it real quick, I'm gonna give it to the Bill Pullman pretending that he's at the payphone scene, where they've got the whole setup. They show they've got two phone lines, and like the number for the payphone is actually the number for that, and then he's just got to jog in place while they're waiting for the phone. I think that that was one of the most entertaining scenes, that in the middle of the bit where I thought it was dragging quite a bit, that really kept me entertained and kept me interested to keep going.
Yeah, what am I picking? I think, I mean, the scene with the PI in the car is pretty good. The scene, but honestly, like anytime she like does something to shock Mike, where she'll just be blunt and say something sexual or whatever,
Mm.
tends to be pretty good. You know,
I will give honorable marks to the first, like the outdoor sex scene that they have next to the chain link fence, and then
hmm.
the car sex scene, just because it is hard and raw and it comes out of nowhere. So it definitely is a shock to the system there.
Yeah. I I guess if I'm forced to narrow it down,
I mean, you make the rules for this segment, Pete. You can easily just say, and I pick
yeah,
two.
I'm going to pick something that I even mentioned before actually.
Hmm.
Is when she comes back after her trip to Buffalo to do the research, and it was when she was leaving that she did the whole spike trap for the car and the
Mm-hmm.
PI that was waiting outside. When she comes back and gets out the cab and she looks over and waves at him and he's standing there, the look of anger on his face was one of the other funny moments of the movie for me that really worked. Um, Although having said that, no, I am going to go with Bill Pullman gagged and yelling out Wendy when he hears the name Wendy.
Oh yeah.
His reaction to that, and then the hopping along till it get to the photograph to show him like that
Mm.
little like 30-second snippet
Oh yeah.
is the moment of the movie for me.
Bill Pullman's great.
All right, I feel like I know the answer to this, but MVP.
Bill Pullman's great.
Yeah, for me it's the lead. For me it's Linda Fiorentino.
Okay.
Fiorentino, however you say her name.
Sure. I'm
Without
not
her,
Italian.
yeah, without her the movie just doesn't work. Like the entire thing hinges on her being compelling,
Mm.
and it's risky having a movie where you're basically following a villainous character because you don't get to have the same type of arc that you would in a normal story. So it has to be compelling in lots of other ways. And I think the performance is, I mean, the writing's there too to some extent, but like I think the performance really is what puts it over the line. So,
Yeah, that's fair.
gotta be her. So, all
Okay.
right, what you rating The Last Seduction?
Oh God. All right. So I, in talking about it, I do appreciate more like the funniness of it, the humor of it. It's hard to appreciate that as I'm like waiting for each line to hit, but it does have a very witty, well-written script for that. But I still, I can't overlook my issues with the pacing and all that. Um, yeah, overall, I was just bored for like a lot of it, and the ending is what really got it out of me. I think that that one really hit, but the rest of the movie just doesn't justify that. So I'm gonna say that this is. I think I gotta give this one like a 4.5. Like I'm just under the middle mark. I know it seems absolutely awful, but like I have no interest in seeing this movie again, and I do think, like, even if I view this from just a technical level, I think that it looks like a cheap movie, and the soundtrack, I cannot stress enough, once you notice it, it never stops. So, yeah, I'm gonna go slightly under that halfway mark, which I know is immediately going to have the average ruined by whatever you give it here.
Wait, why am I the one ruining the? You're the one ruining the average. You're the one with the weird, like, ultra negative
I'm the
view on
weird
it.
one. I'm sorry. I believe that Siskel and Ebert only gave it a 4.
Out of how many?
I don't know. I'm assuming 10. We'll go with 10.
um, I think for me, this is a 7.5. It's not quite up into great, and that may just come down to caring more about Mike's character and making like that side of it be a bit more compelling. But I think the main character is captivating to watch. Bill Pullman's great in the supporting role that's mostly comedic. It's funny. Yeah, it's got a kind of a cool vibe at points. So yeah, and this is the second time I watched it. I think it worked just as well this time, if not a little bit better than the first time I watched it. So yeah,
Okay.
but it does mostly all hinge on that lead performance being captivating, which it is for the most part. So yeah, there you go. Last
right.
Seduction.
I'm glad we found our reverse alien covenant.
Did you say covenant or covenant?
Why would I say covenant?
Because we're doing erotic thrillers. I don't know.
No.
That's what I heard. I heard come in it.
I think you need to watch Fiorentino's earlier work. Sounds like you got something on the mind.
Oh dear. All right.
Oh, we need to say, does this make the cut? This might be a tough one.
Yeah, I think it makes the cut.
Why you gotta push me like this, Pete? Why you gotta do this? I can't put this as makes the cut. I got it. I'm willing to meet you at cutting it close, but like for me, it's a low cutting it close if I'm just doing it on my own.
I mean, I guess we have to agree in cutting it close, but I don't think I have ever, like, if I've rated something a 4 or 4.5, I've never rooted for cutting it close on that. That is a clear cut. So
On a 4.5?
yeah, not including the extra reels because that's a very different
Okay,
scale.
yeah, that's fair. Sorry, I'm just looking through it. I think you're right. I don't think you have, but I, again, I guess deep down, I do have this little bit of self-loathing of everyone else seems to get something that I don't get. What am I missing? And I'm just trying to appease that a little bit, but I have to stay true to myself here.
Fine,
Pete.
it can get cutting it close, but
Okay.
this was a split decision. People can go watch the movie for yourself and
Yes.
see what side you land
Please
on.
weigh in. I want to, if anybody can explain to me what I'm missing without saying strong female lead, please. Because, like, I know there's a strong female lead. I get that. That's not the part I'm upset about.
Well, yeah, but it's not just there's a strong female lead; it's a compelling performance. It's entertaining.
Okay, without any of that stuff. Because, again, if you just read the last paragraph of Siskel and Ebert's review, if you use any of those same phrases, I get it. I know that that's supposedly there. I just don't see it as enough.
Supposedly there. You can't even say it is there. It's supposedly there.
Look, this is a very subjective art style that we do here. I'm not going to lessen myself to say that something is definitely there when I'm not the one seeing it.
That's fine. That's fine. Well,
Also, the earth is flat.
next up on Collector's Cut, we're looking at Bound. So I've never seen this. I've heard of it. This was the Wachowskis' movie before The Matrix. So curious to see how that goes. But
Somehow even more leather.
that's coming next week on the show. Of course, you can get bonus content if you want to support the show and support all the shows here on Male Fuzz Movies or even Male Fuzz TV. You can support us over at patreon.com/MaleFuzzTV, and me and David do 2 bonus shows a month on there. There's other stuff as well, but there's things you can get from me and David are extra reels, some of the worst movies ever made. That's a monthly review show, as is the Criterion Cut, where we review movies from the Criterion Collection. So it's very much polar opposites in those 2 shows. One's prestigious, artsy, like deep thematics, like proper discussions.
And the other is Criterion Cut.
Now the other one is like staring into the void, looking into the abyss, and just seeing the giant Neil Breen face look back at you. And how do you respond to that? I don't know how you respond to that, but we're
I'd
trying.
imagine I dodged the laptop that's about to be thrown at me.
Or the spoon that's coming out with tuna on it. Just
Yes.
eat your tuna.
Mm-hmm.
Eat your tuna. All right. That is the show, everyone. Support us over at Patreon or via YouTube membership if that's more your thing. But Patreon combines both channels, so maybe better if you want to go do that. But thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. It has been pleasure's a bit of a stretch, but it's been something.
It's been a fun 100 episodes, and I look forward to the next, 6.
600, yeah, that's the spirit. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. We do appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.